Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Mutual Ventures webinar on SEND and the Families First Partnership Program. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us. We're going to spend a little bit of time today looking at what some of the opportunities for local authorities who are in the process of kind of co-designing and embedding and basically getting up and running your FFP reform program. What we're not really going to look at today is some of the more technical elements of the reforms. So if you would like to learn a little bit more about what the different pillars of the reforms are or any of the new roles, I would highly encourage you to go have a look at K-Hub, which is a very comprehensive kind of platform with loads of learning material on the reforms. But today we will be specifically focusing on SEND and how it kind of overlays with the reforms. I am joined by some really fabulous guest speakers today, which I'm very happy to have with me. The structure of the day will be a couple of presentations, just sharing some learning and insights from myself and the speakers about their experience on the program. And then we will have an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, it's definitely the right place to be. I will encourage you to just pop them into the Q&A chat and we will pick them up as we go. But just want to take a moment to introduce myself and the speakers. For those who I haven't met before, I have been working on the FFP program as a coach for the last 2 years, both with Pathfinder local authorities, but also more recently as part of the national rollout. And it's through that opportunity that I've had a chance to work more closely with Trevor and Alison and Adele, who I'm going to ask to come in and introduce themselves now. Trevor, I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Trevor Dougherty. I'm a former DCS and DFE Children's Commissioner, and I've been working on FFP as an associate for Mutual Ventures for the past couple of years and have developed a particular interest in how FFP and SEND work together or have problems working together. And so more of that later.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Alison?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Alison Noble. I'm the Temporary Executive Director and Statutory Director of Children's Services for Derbyshire Local Authority, and really welcome this opportunity to speak with people today around our journey in this respect to strengthen our preventative arm through the Family First Partnership that really leans into our focus on special educational needs and disability. What we know is that often it can be the same cohort of children that we are working with across children's social care and special educational needs and disability. And so having a keen eye on who our children are, what their needs are, and where we actually ensure that we are efficient and effective in providing the right support that is preventative for those children in relation to not only family breakdown, but ensuring that their needs are met around their special educational needs and disability. So it's really critical to us. So really pleased to have this opportunity to come and speak with you this afternoon. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Alison. And Adele?
Yeah, hi. My name's Adele Glover and I'm the Director of Family Help and Children's Social Care in Derbyshire County Council, and I'm also the SRO for Derbyshire's Families First Partnership Programme. So I'm here this afternoon really just to share some experiences that we've had locally in Derbyshire in relation to the relationship of the priorities for our Families First Partnership Programme and also services for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you to the three of you for taking time today. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to hand over to you, Trevor, to talk a little bit about some of your experience within this area.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, and good afternoon, everybody. I suppose my job this afternoon is to set the scene, and I'll make a few points, and I've got a couple of slides which I think highlight the issues, and then I think most importantly you'll be hearing from Derbyshire on what they're doing to tackle those issues. So as you'll be aware, some of the major themes of the independent review of children's social care, which led to the Family First Partnership Framework, and of course all authorities must adopt, are based on families telling the review that they wanted less handovers and not to have to undergo multiple assessments. You know, as we hear the line many times, to tell their story once. However, as Alison has alluded to, almost all authorities have separate social care and SEND systems, which means that children and families that have both social care and SEND needs have to negotiate and navigate quite a complex, multi-layered system. And there are understandable reasons why authorities are doing that, because the statutory processes dictate that, and also both SEND and children's social care have different practice approaches, I would argue, even almost different philosophical approaches. So broadly speaking, modern social work practice is based on strength-based practice and trauma-informed viewing, viewing the needs of children and families as an environmental issue that could be poverty, risk of harm through neglect, substance misuse, parental health, or other factors affecting the child. So it's very much based around the child and their environment and how that environment is affecting the child. Whereas SEND diagnosis, now I'll come back to this, SEND is a diagnosis-based approach based around the individual child. And I'll come back to that with a quote from the ISOS report in a moment when I go into the slides. And coupled with that, and everybody will be aware of this, SEND is arguably the biggest issue facing local authorities in terms of meeting demand or need, whichever word you prefer to use, and they're sometimes used interchangeably, and the huge financial challenges that come along with it. And we heard from the Chancellor earlier in the week about government plans to work on those financial issues for local authorities. But even with that 2028 change, there's still huge questions and huge problems for local authorities. But what both FFP and SEND have in common is complete agreement that systems can only get better and can only work through early intervention and multi-agency teams. And so if we can go on to the slides, Jordan. This is, with Derbyshire's permission, a quote from their, or 3 points from their SEND inspection, which I think is a kind of, these are recommendations that are common to many SEND inspections. And it emphasizes in the first one, multi-agency assessment of needs for SEND children. It emphasizes early help in the second one, but also, and I think crucially, it accepts the much broader definition there is of disability following the 2014 Act, but following general approaches to SEND in the last 5, 10, 15 years, where the concept of disability has broadened significantly, so that most local authorities that have a system whereby SEND is separate, but as part of children's social care, you have a children with disability team. The concept of disability, when those children with disability teams were set up to do social work practice, some including child protection, some not, but to include assessments of need and oversee judgments around Section 17 payments. That definition has broadened considerably. Jordan, next slide, please. So just a quick bit of data, and these are generally taken from an ISOS report that they did for the LGA a couple of years ago now, but the stark data is still just as pertinent. So EHCPs have gone up by 140% in the last 10 years. of those, 88% are autism spectrum disorder, emotional and mental health needs, speech and language communication. So emphasizing the point about the view of disability has broadened considerably. But, and again, going back to the point I made earlier, the SEND approach has been, and again, this I'm not giving a view here, but I'm quoting the ISOS report. Rhetoric espoused by national government since 2014 has signalled a shift away from inclusion and has perpetuated a medical deficit-based understanding of need, where children and young people who do not fit the mould require a separate specialist education. Hence the two approaches of social work and SEND and two systems. But as Alison said earlier, not all, but a lot of these are the same children. Next slide, please, Jordan. So this is the definition of SEND, which is a DFE definition. A child or a young person is defined in law as having SEND if they have significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of others at the same age, or they have a disability that hinders them making use of the facilities provided for others of the age in mainstream education. So this would include, I would argue, all or many children who have social care needs, whose learning is being encumbered in some way by their environment or their home circumstances. On to the next slide, please, Jordan. And this is the Children in Need definition, which goes back to the 1989 Children Act, but is still something that all authorities have to work to, that a child who is unlikely to achieve or maintain or have the opportunity of maintaining a reasonable standard or health development without the provision of services by a local authority, or who is disabled. So a child in need definition is still telling us that if a child is disabled, then they are classified as a child in need. But in 1989, the view of what was a disability was much narrower than it is now. And I'm not arguing whether that is a good or a bad thing, but it means in looking at these two services together, the challenges are far wider and greater than they would have been then. Next slide, please. Again, this is going to the Family First Pathfinders guidance that children and families with multiple and complex needs that require a plan to be in place and a lead practitioner appointed. Again, a very wide range of children, but children who are, if they have multiple and complex needs, that is in most cases going to include SEND needs. Next slide, please. So, and what the FFP programme tells all of you as local authorities and companion agencies to do is aim that services are fully connected and rebalance the whole system. So what I've tried to do in setting out the scene is say how these are often the same children, not always. They are different systems with different approaches, but unless we find better ways of connecting them and delivering together, the chances of having providing help in the best possible and most efficient ways to families is pretty significantly affected. So I will stop there, if I may, as a scene setting, and I think what I've done is kind of set out the problems, but I think what is the encouraging thing is to hear now from colleagues about how they're being addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Really, really helpful. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time reflecting on some of the things that we've heard from both Pathfinder local authorities, but also a kind of wider range of local authorities as they've worked towards implementing and embedding the reforms. And what I would say is that the reforms and how you've seen it laid out in programme guidance has a kind of set of minimum requirements that it needs each of the areas to meet. But there is a lot of focus on local context, local variation. And I've worked with so many different areas, from London-based local authorities to coastal local authorities that have all been fundamentally different across every kind of measure that you could think of. And the importance that local context and understanding what your group of children and families that sit within your area is so fundamental to these reforms. And that extends and is particularly important when you consider SEND and how the two overlay. So one of the things I would just really encourage is always to bring, as practitioners, you will have that unique understanding of what it looks like and feels like to be a child within your area. And so how do you design a system with that in mind? So just a little bit of a plea from me, because I think it's always so relevant when we start to think about kind of how the process part of this works. So, as I said, having worked with a number of areas, some of the things that I've picked up from coaching experience and also having spoken to a number of the other coaches is just a couple of things that we would recommend areas or consider as you are thinking about how to incorporate SEND as part of your kind of program oversight and development. So to the point that Trevor just made, I think understanding your cohort overlap. So there will be a cohort of children who sit across both SEND and children's social care. For each area, the number of children, as well as the type of support they will be receiving or need to receive, will vary depending on your type of local authority. But kind of my question back to you is, how much do you genuinely understand what that overlap looks like? And not just from a static point in time, but what are the changes and the trends that you've seen, particularly post-COVID, and how that's impacted SEND cohorts and numbers and diagnoses? Do you really understand from a data-driven perspective as well as an anecdotal perspective what that looks like? So that would be my first kind of question to you. And I'm going to come with lots of questions, but they are also hidden in their advice. The second, and again, this is a point that Trevor's already made, around early intervention as a shared principle. So people who are familiar with the reforms will see how this early intervention is really the cornerstone of the entire system of reform. It is moving support and focus and energy and expertise to hold, identify, and support children and families earlier on. Now, that is also a kind of core principle of how areas are wanting to support kind of children with SEND. And so if that is a similar shared value, how do you kind of align your processes, even if that is more how practitioners work with each other rather than the processes for an individual child, to show that where there are concerns around maybe social care concerns, how is that being flagged appropriately? How are you sure that a child that you're engaging with has kind of been picked up through kind of SEND support channels? Do you really understand how your practitioners are speaking to each other, and do they understand when and how they're supposed to be speaking to each other about this? Then aligning pathways as well. So it's, I mean, you will be familiar with this, that, support is, SEND support is mainly delivered through educational settings, while social care interventions are tailored as they should be and as the FFP reforms encourage. So a single joint assessment doesn't necessarily feel practical, but again, those of you familiar with the reforms will know that a single assessment is such a kind of key cornerstone of the reforms. Does that then exclude this kind of element of support? Well, for reasons, as we've discussed, it might need to, but it's so important to understand how they are speaking to each other. So, mapping your processes to identify overlaps and misalignments. Are there spaces for your practitioners to meet and share learning as part of the FFP program when you've got all those people focused, but specifically to talk about this? And Adele and Alison will, chat a little bit more about how they've done that. And then finally, the point that everybody makes time and time again, and were FFP to be able to solve this issue, we'd all be very happy, but data and information sharing, particularly across agencies. And so how do you ensure that your systems are set up to make sure that both quantitative and qualitative insights are shared from practitioner to practitioner. And it might be something as simple as just checking how your systems actually speak to each other. Are there spaces on your social care systems to flag if a child has an EHCP and vice versa? It's some things like that we've worked with areas that actually don't have that built into their system. And so it's that kind of starting point to help you start to build up a mindset around how you not merge the two, because they are two separate things, as they absolutely should be, but how do you consider the two for children and families where you need to? So I've moved through that fairly quickly, but I wanted to make sure that we saved time, the majority of the time, to hear from Derbyshire about their experience. So Adele, if I could invite you in.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jordan. Really, really helpful. So I guess reflecting, our starting point was recognising that we've got a couple of really significant partnership arrangements taking place in Derbyshire. Trevor referenced that we'd had our SEND inspection, which as a result of that required us to have a considerable local area partnership response to develop a programme of improvements around services for children with special educational needs and disabilities. And then, of course, we also have our Families First partnership programme, which is really great opportunity to strengthen family help and children's social care and child protection frameworks. And sitting in both of those and thinking about what do they look like really kind of made me think there's such a relationship and interconnectivity between those priorities and the impact and the outputs for the families that we support and the children that we work with. So we made the decision that we were going to have a bit of a workshop, and we got multi-agency partnership together as our kind of initial response to the SEND area inspection that we got in our SEND impact plan, running alongside the change programme for Families First. As been referenced earlier by Trevor, our inspection findings for SEND highlighted challenges for us in providing coherent support for children with complex needs, particularly those navigating overlapping statutory processes, such as those children who had EHCP, but also had a child protection plan, for example. So many of the children, as we've referred to, we know are open to both services, SEND and social care, but also have lots of engagement and involvement from partners in many different ways. So we wanted to kind of understand a little bit more about how joined up might some of those arrangements be and what that might be, that gap analysis really. So we had the workshop, we brought the professionals together. We had that workshop back in August now. And it was a really important event for us as it transpires now. And the decision that we made from ultimately from this session was that we was going to really consider SEND being an extra pillar of our Families First reforms, and thinking about it in that way, because clearly there's, as I said, a relationship between all of those priorities that we've got to deliver through Families First. So I was really grateful in Derbyshire that we were supported at that event. We got our Director for Education and Inclusion, Jo Wilson, was there supporting and sharing kind of our landscape on SEND. And we had Jordan and Trevor join us as well at this event. And really the session was designed to kind of foster that collaboration and generate some practical ideas for improving outcomes where we possibly could identify them to be for children and families. So some of the key drivers that underpinned the session included clearly the SEND area inspection findings, but we also wanted to really understand family experience, which I'll come on to on the next slide. But what we knew generally was that families often, through our feedback routes and quality assurance routes, say that they, feel overwhelmed by multiple kind of arrangements and multiple involvements and relationships with different partners, and being involved in different processes and pathways. So often what we can see through those feedback loops was that there was some inconsistencies in communications, which has a considerable impact on children and families and their experiences of receiving service. And then, of course, the other driver was the national reforms in relation to families first. Thank you, Jordan. So what we did at the event was we had interactive breakout discussions where participants in the event explored how SEND improvements could align with the goals of the Families First partnership. And we had two central questions that guided the discussions really through the event. And that was what SEND reform can learn from Families First partnership programme, and whether integrated relationship-focused support systems is desirable and achievable through all of that. So participants emphasised the importance of aligning expectations to need, promoting early identification and intervention and improving cross-agency culture. And what we chose to do in the session was to really look through the lens of family experience. So we identified and used a detailed case study of a little boy who had ADHD and sensory processing difficulties, subject to EHCP and child protection planning. And we had some feedback from the family that we were able to use, and some quality assurance information as well, just to understand the family experience and for us to see what that journey may have looked like through their lens. And that was really insightful for us as professionals and as a strategic partnership group. So we examined points of impact for the child and for the family. And through that, we could establish and understand much more clearly short-term consequences that we could identify, such as missed support opportunities or duplication of activity, but also long-term risks that we might identify, such as those that would come through poor outcomes through trauma. So the case study itself kind of really revealed overlapping review processes, and we've already touched on that in this session this afternoon. But clearly fragmented communication as well between professionals through those statutory processes and the engagement in the statutory processes. And what we could see the impact has been the parental engagement fatigue and inconsistent recording. And we did feel that that there were opportunities then that could have been responded to differently for this family. There was a vulnerability that we could see that some of that would have led to services really struggling to engage the family in different touch points because of some of that fatigue. So through that activity, the participants proposed several kind of improvements, such as assigning key named professionals to coordinate support, exploring the possibilities of aligning SEND and family help and child protection review processes where at all possible to reduce duplication. There was consideration around the value of involving educational psychologists in different review processes, and certainly the really important value of implementing and growing an offer that we currently have around group reflective supervision with key partners. And the proposals really were aimed to create a more coherent and supportive system for children who would be in similar circumstances. So through the session, there were several consistent themes really that we identified, and those were around participants highlighting the need for integration of SEND and social care assessments where possible to reduce duplication, strengthen communication. There was recognition of the real importance and value of early help and multidisciplinary teams, centralised information hubs, and lead practitioners to streamline support, very much aligned to the principles of Families First. And that these were emphasised as by the group as foundational to really effective support. So the group kind of reflected that achieving the reform required a cultural shift from across agencies with shared language, values and accountability. And in response, we considered how we could align some of the work underway within our SEND improvement plan, and how we could co-produce, how we could use through the Families First to co-produce SEND engagement and communication strategy and outcomes from a parent-carer session that we had on shared language and values. We explored how we might be able to strengthen data sharing and visibility across systems that were identified as real critical enablers to joint planning and safeguarding. And the insights underscored the urgency of systemic change to better support children with complex needs. Do you want to come in there, Jordan? I just have just one final thing, I think, to finish on. Did you? Oh, sorry, I thought you had your hand up there. Okay, thank you. So the workshop highlighted, as I've said, the kind of fragmented support that we could see through that lens of family experience. So there were some key recommendations, including, where possible, implementing joint assessments, establishing centralised information hubs, and strengthening the data set. So the next steps involved aligning our SEND and Families First partnership strategies, developing integrated protocols where we possibly could, and enhancing workforce training to support multidisciplinary collaboration. What we experienced was there was workforce development in different spaces, but it wasn't really coming together, and there was some really opportunity to collaborate more in that space. So the outcome vision really was to create a responsive, relationship-focused system to adapt to the needs of children and families in Derbyshire. And since the session, we've commenced arrangements to align our SEND services and our educational clusters to our social care and family help structures in Derbyshire. And we've utilised some of the Families First grant to help strengthen multi-agency family help in the context of early intervention, where we recognise that there are children with complex needs. We have focused on fostering a more joined up approach across services to strengthen information sharing, and aligned some of our outcome frameworks and quality assurance systems across both special educational needs services and family help structures. We've drawn relevant data together to enable a greater understanding of the holistic needs of children, accessing specialist services and accessing family help and social care services. And whilst this is still in its infancy for us, we have had some strengthened data sets that's enabled us to be much more confident about how we can progress that still to achieve the objective that we want to achieve, which is absolutely around that data set informing and strengthening commissioning arrangements and strengthening the partnership service designs and delivery through the models that we have. So we know in Derbyshire that we've still got a lot of work ahead. And as Trevor referenced earlier, and I think Jordan, we're not alone with that as a local authority. I feel that in Derbyshire that we've got opportunities through the discussions that we've had to be really quite optimistic and encouraged by some of the strategic discussions and decisions that we've made. And certainly really see that moving forward, we've got some of the infrastructure now to be able to build on some of those early decisions and considerations that we had back in August when we held that multi-agency workshop session together. So I think with that, Jordan, I'll come back to yourself if that's okay.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Just to say thank you to Adele and Trevor for your presentations. That was really great. We've got a bit of time now for Q&A. And actually, I have a question that I just wanted to pose to Alison. It was just to get some of your reflections on both the workshop that took place in August and how that kind of played out, but also just from your perspective of how things have kind of developed and progressed with Derbyshire having such a big focus on SEND. I mean, the only area I've worked with that kind of refers to SEND is the fourth pillar, which I always loved.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak about this. I think the there was definite energy in the room when we had the event, which I was really privileged to be a part of. And that energy was across partners. I think it was one of the first times that we in Derbyshire have probably really felt that vibrancy and a real will and desire to do things differently. And yes, there could have been impetus from the outcome of our SEND inspection. There is no doubt that is having a bearing in relation to how we are focusing on our children with special educational needs and disability across the local authority footprint. And, you know, we've reflected long and hard over this last year about where our system has been failing those children. This is really giving us a different, slightly different dimension around being able to ensure that we are focused on all children around early intervention and prevention. And I think what it's meaning is that even when we're in a circumstance of needing to remove a child from their birth family and bring a child into care, for example, we are having a discussion that, for me, feels more significant about their educational needs and how does that impact on where they live, how they live, who they live with. And I think, therefore, the dialogue that we've had is being more pervasive into how we are working with our whole population of children where special educational needs and disability features and impacts on their learning and most importantly impacts on their outcomes for the future, and trying very hard to get that right. We have got a long journey ahead of us. I'm not saying that we've got this where we want it to be, but it is really energising and it is really hopeful that we may just get a little bit further in this wish and desire of our parents and children that there is one conversation, not multiple conversations on the same issue. So I think there's lots of benefits that we can achieve over time.
Thank you. That was really great. And I think your kind of final point around that one conversation, it's just so important for building trust. The system works and understands itself and understands that child's particular needs. So thank you for that. Fantastic. So I'm going to come to some questions from the audience. Just a reminder to anyone, if you have any questions for our speakers, please do pop it in the Q&A. Anything that we don't have a chance to pick up today, we will try and share some insights on post-webinar. But one of the questions that has come through, one of the challenges in supporting children with SEND/complex needs is that it has become highly specialised and largely disconnected from ordinary connections and relationships. We've been thinking about how to shift more towards non-service support and reconnect young people and families and everyday assets in communities. Has this been considered in the Derbyshire work? So, Alison or Adele?
Shall I maybe start that off? I think, yes, it has. And again, interestingly, perhaps with the focus on our improvement impact plan, we're calling it an impact plan rather than an improvement plan for our SEND work. And this is about whole systems approach, and it is about looking early in the system about how we get those considerations right and better and more preventative. So I think we are on a journey across all of our partnership because we have been behind the curve in relation to our early help, working in partnership with other areas of universal service to make sure that we are responding early rather than referring and re-referring across agencies. So I think this has opened up a deeper dialogue in that area and is beginning to affect some change, which is going to be really valuable for the future. Adele might have more that she wants to add to that.
I think just to share as well that I referred to kind of that real sense of workforce development and demystifying some things and kind of coming together much more as a partnership to have an environment where we can better support each other to understand the complexities. And I think at times what we could see was there were individuals kind of working with the family. Well, that bit belongs there because that's the complexity I don't really understand, or, you know, and that again can lead to some fragmentation. And I think as the partnership comes together, what I'm certainly really keen on is how we can break those barriers down and share those, share that information much more effectively together, and have that joined up approach for some workforce development as well. Because I think that I do believe that some of those issues can impact and have some fragmentation. That said, clearly, I think in terms of the question itself, I mean, it's a very, very fair one, because I think that we would all recognise that reflection, and certainly it's something that we would still be working through, definitely.
Great. We've got a bit of a follow-on from that one around if you, Derbyshire, have family hubs, and if so, how do they support with SEND?
So we have got family hubs, not as many as we would like. We were not fortunate enough to actually receive the government funding in relation to family hubs from a couple of years ago. But what we did do 2 or 3 years ago was worked very hard to preserve a Derbyshire-wide offer of family help, in particular in those early years. So our children's centre cohort has reduced from 56 Sure Start centres from some years ago to 11. But what it has done is still given us a basic footprint across the local authority area. What we're looking to do now is enhance that further through the use of the Family Hub funding and the strengthening of the direction in that Best Start family life. And we are working to strengthen our Family Hub model. And part of that will be also to incorporate elements of connectivity around special educational needs and disability. And I did see that there was a question a little bit earlier on around the access of the operational SEND service and how that is built into our offer. Again, we're very early in our thinking, and largely our focus for that area of service has been on our impact plan and on the movement that we need to have in relation to our SEND services. But we have got really clear dialogue that is happening across education and inclusion, through children's social care, through family early help, and through this strategic partnership. And the governance of the Family First Partnership is branching across all areas. So it isn't isolated, and it will definitely be that there will be some opportunities for joint training, maybe some structural changes, because there could be some structures that we need to change into the new year in SEND, and we will definitely be embracing that joint dialogue across all of our service to make sure that we don't miss an opportunity.
Fantastic. Trevor, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you a question, but I'm also going to ask you to answer it in a minute. So it feels slightly unfair, but just any initial thoughts. Is there an appetite, have you seen as kind of in your work and coaching across different areas around commissioning or corporate services to consider SEND as a public health issue as opposed to a specialist issue? If there was more ordinarily available resources in the community, services need not step in until absolutely necessary. So it's a loaded question, and
Yes,
I've not given you a lot of time to answer it, but just some initial thoughts.
Thanks, Jordan. And I think it relates to one of the other questions, and I think the point is that if there's greater prevention at the universal level and a greater sensitivity at the universal level around difference, then is that, and however that's funded, and I get the bit about it being corporately funded, because there's I think a general concern about universal services are thinner and thinned out after 2010 because of financial necessity. We hear a lot about the old Sure Starts, youth clubs, etc. So I do think there is a point about
That's appreciated, and like I said, I know I didn't give you a huge amount of time, but that was really helpful and insightful. We have reached the end of the session. It has flown by, but we will pick up any additional questions that come through. If you have any questions that you've not popped in the chat, please do feel free to email through our email address. Hopefully a lot of you have come from the mailing list, so please do feel free to email those through. But I just wanted to say a massive thank you again to Trevor, Adele and Alison for your time today. It's really appreciated, and just by the sheer number of attendees, obviously a very kind of a subject at the center of a lot of people's thinking. So thank you for your insights, and thank you to all of you for attending. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.